Smash roster speculation has followed different trends and themes across the series' history, as you might already know. Ranging from childhood favorites to up-and-comers with a lot of potential to third-party guests sometimes, or most of the time in talk nowadays, it's really run the gamut. But much of the community right now, as we wrap up DLC, has started dreading and resenting one idea in particular: the reveal of any character they consider safe, predictable, and boring. If you've seen the discourse lately, there's this dread that locks people in. With all the huge third-party icons so often talked about, it's led many fans to expect only huge third-party icons. Ultimate's become such a meeting point of franchises and companies that the idea of making the crossover bigger and wilder has, in some circles, become priority number one. The sheer spectacle of it all, and gaming's current hype culture, have led to a greater focus on the individual reveals than on the game itself. A safe, predictable pick would get in the way of the hype, or so the idea goes. But this focus has caused a lot of problems. Not every newcomer in Smash needs to be a huge AAA guest fighter. Between potential issues with budgets, red tape, or lack of cooperation, it's just not realistic. And the idea that only mind-blowing surprises can get anyone to care is straight up false. Everyone following rumors back in the day saw Lucario and Shulk coming in their debut games, yet welcomed them with open arms. And a certain maligned anime sword fighter sure gets played an awful lot as a pocket character. Another safe choice could easily follow in their footsteps. This is Challenger Approaching, where we take a character who isn't playable in Smash yet and go deep into detail on what they could be like if they got in for real. Our challenger this time is someone who's been framed as the epitome of safe and bland, but taking a closer look shows full well that predictable need not mean boring.
Cinderace!
Cinderace is the fully evolved form of Scorbunny and the fire-type starter of the Galar region in Pokémon Sword and Shield. More than just another fire user, this one puts its British inspiration front and center by sporting the aesthetics and sensibilities of the game of soccer, or football if you're not an uncultured American like myself, with the ability to create fireballs and kick them toward foes with surgical precision. But this species doesn't just rock the look and talent, they have an athlete's personality to match. According to the in-universe Pokédex, they're said to be skilled at attacking and defending alike, performing even better if there's a crowd cheering them on. But they're also prone to caring too much about showing off to an audience, requiring extra training to know when not to go for flashy but ineffective plays. In case you've been living under a rock, and I wouldn't blame you if you have, the last year was rough. Sword and Shield have been kind of a big deal, and the Scorbunny line, Cinderace included, have been a big deal even by Sword and Shield standards, given extra prominence a rung above the other Galar starters. Since there hasn't been a true Lucario counterpart in Pokemon's 8th generation, this prominence has stood out even more. We're talking promotional stuff, a starring role in the anime as the signature mon of Ash's traveling companion Go, and a whole lot of merchandise. Needless to say, the Smash community has taken notice, with ARMS, Xenoblade 2, and Fire Emblem 3 Houses all getting newcomers through DLC. Sword and Shield are now the biggest Switch titles by far to not have significant content in the game as of right now. A whole lot of speculators are expecting a Gen 8 Pokemon to make it in before all is said and done, and while a handful of other Galar natives are brought up occasionally, Cinderace is generally the one expected most. Which hasn't sat right with certain fans who see this character, or any from Sword and Shield, as a letdown waiting to happen compared to any of the biggest names in gaming who could possibly get invited instead. It's a complicated and uneasy situation, spurred on by too many knee-jerk assumptions. On one hand, I think painting any single Pokemon as a shoo-in right now isn't a good idea when there are multiple viable choices. As we saw with Gen 7, being a super prominent starter or having a starring role in the anime isn't a guaranteed invite when there are other options who could sneak in for other reasons. On the other hand, claiming Cinderace, or anyone else from Sword and Shield, would be a boring way to finish just because they're easy to see coming is missing the point, especially when we've had several predictable fighters, both in Ultimate and prior entries, wind up very well liked once all was said and done. Overall, this is a character who isn't necessarily the shoo-in they're presumed to be, but if they do get the nod, by no means would it be a letdown, as we'll see why now. Alright, warmed up. Let's go. What would Cinderace be like in Smash? Basic appearance is pretty easy to set up for this one. Just pull the model from Sword and Shield and start with that. The benefits of being a modern character from a 3D game. Could see some touch-ups here or there, like more detailed fur texture to better fit Ultimate's different art style, but not a whole lot would actually need to change. For animations, we want to take the footballer angle and run with it, figuratively and literally. Movements should look energetic yet precise, as if made by someone who's practiced this stuff more times than you could ever imagine, but still loves going out and playing their heart out for the fans. If the devs wanted to get cheeky, they could even play with soccer stereotypes and have Cinderace oversell it when getting tripped or stunned. Sorry, no cards getting issued here. Unless maybe you subscribe and turn the bell on so you know when new videos are out. For alternate colors, we have a few things to work with. For one, you know those uniforms the gym trainers wear that you get from beating the leaders, or buying in Motostoke for the types that don't have gyms? How about a few palettes based on some of those? Fire would be obvious, but we could use some others that are closely enough related and provide some aesthetic variety. Could also have a quote-quote visiting team version of the default colors. Maybe the shiny form could work for that. And we have a certain other notable rabbit line to pull colors from, and one other long-eared mon of ambiguous real-world inspiration. Moving fast. On to Cinderace's attributes and stats. For playstyle, we want to capture the personality and lore in a way that feels like it truly embodies the character, especially since we're technically representing an entire species here. What we got here is someone who's fast, skilled in combat, capable of some flashy maneuvers, but has to be careful not to go over the top with them. Overall, I think this points toward a hit-and-run fighting style, playing to Cinderace's natural swiftness and putting emphasis on making thoughtful decisions just like playing professional sports. There are tools here to do well in neutral situations and get out of a disadvantage more easily than most fighters, but a lack of true sustained pressure necessitates retreating after throwing out an attack or two, or else you risk getting overwhelmed, along with having to work harder to keep your advantage state going. There are also some dynamic elements in here, changing how some moves and abilities function based on certain factors. We'll get to those in a bit, but for now, just know it means this fighter's game plan requires doing a lot of adapting mid-match. As far as exact stats go, we should talk about that size marker first. Pokemon characters usually get sized up in Smash, which means the normally 4'7" Cinderace winds up roughly 6 feet tall here, more if you count the ears. Being on the taller side and therefore easier to hit is a real weak point, especially if you don't weigh very much. Your typical Cinderace is lighter than your typical Lucario or Greninja, and I took that into account. Being a lightweight means being vulnerable to losing stocks pretty early, so you'd have to be careful not to take much stray damage. Fortunately, it's made up for with mobility, with an above-average walk, more like hopping from one foot to the other animation-wise, above-average airspeed, and fast running and falling speeds. If having only top 20 run speed seems slow compared to how fast this character is in canon, don't worry, there are ways to buff this mobility further. You'll see. Cinderace also has particularly high jumps, since, rabbit, which helps cover vertical distance quickly and makes recovering easier, combining with a couple other tools to make for a fighter that is quite difficult to edgeguard. Cinderace's attacks are where this gets unusual. The majority of their repertoire has above average speed but subpar damage and knockback power. But some moves are slower, stronger, and scarier, as long as they hit. And that's without the aforementioned dynamic elements. Depending on how you're doing, damage output can range from mediocre to really good, and certain moves become more reliable at finishing off enemy stocks. It'd take a skilled hand to make the most of the tools available and be able to tap into the bigger numbers consistently. Up next is Cinderace's moveset. But before we get into that, we should talk about the overarching mechanic that ties it together. Remember that one line about how this entire species gets energized by a cheering crowd? I took that idea and ran with it. While in a fight, a meter would appear next to the Cinderace player's display that portrays the excitement level of an off-screen audience. The one that chants characters' names sometimes. Performing specific attacks within this moveset, all of which use fire somehow, and successfully striking an opponent with them builds the crowd's excitement level. The more the meter raises, the more buffs you receive to mobility and damage output, and the stronger your specials become. As well as some extra visual effects. Level 2 cheer makes Cinderace's feet heat up and leave scorching footprints while walking or running, while level 3 cheer sets their feet ablaze and leaves behind a non-damaging trail of flames. This fighter literally gets fired up by the roar of the crowd. Managing the cheer meter lets you unlock Cinderace's true potential. But be warned, the meter slowly empties over time, meaning you have to keep impressing the fans to keep your buffs up. And the moves that build meters sacrifice substance for style. They all have flaws that make them more difficult to use than your typical attacks. Just like the lore alludes to, going for flashy stuff too often will just put yourself in a tough spot. With all that in mind, let's start the moveset itself with Cinderace's basic attacks. Beginning with a jab combo that consists of a 1-2 punch with one hand then the other. It's a two-part jab with mediocre damage that's on the slow side, and honestly it's not very good. What do you expect from a character unaccustomed to fighting with their hands? The forward tilt makes up for it, a rising kick that reaches medium height. It looks more or less like the archetypical soccer kick, or a little like Cinderace's official art. The move's a staple footsies tool that almost works like a replacement jab, comboing into a couple things at lower percents and eventually killing near the ledge. Here's a unique up tilt. Cinderace hops in place and attempts to headbutt anything directly above. The hitbox on it isn't very big and won't hit grounded opponents unless they're right on you, but its minimal base knockback makes it a very effective combo move for a large percent range. And after that, it's still great for keeping opponents in the air. Cinderace's down tilt is a straight kick at ground level, which sounds pretty basic, but just like the description of the move it's inspired by, it has a chance to trip anyone it hits, which can set up opportunities to land some flashier stuff if you predict what they'll do to get up. And now we've reached the first of several flare attacks. Cinderace's dash attack involves generating fire around their arms, then leaping forward like a goalie trying to block a shot. With as much distance as Snake's dash attack and legitimate power, it excels at catching landings or whiff punishing with nearly the strength of a smash attack. However, the lengthy animation at the start makes it slow to come out, and it has a ton of end lag afterward. Save it for when an opponent can't easily block or avoid it. And that's just a taste of what this character can do. Cinderace's smash attacks crank it up even further. Like a forward smash where they gather fire in the foot that faces the camera, then leap up and perform a fiery roundhouse kick immediately ahead. A combination of the moves Blaze Kick and Mega Kick, it's as strong as it sounds, and its frame data actually isn't that bad by smash attack standards. Instead, its drawback is a hitbox that isn't very big, especially by smash attack standards, and since the kick is elevated, it's easy to duck under. Cinderace's up smash combines Blaze Kick with a different move instead, gathering fire the same way as the forward smash, though with a different pose so you can tell the two apart, then leaping in place and performing a rising kick wreathed in flame. It's another strong hit with decent frame data kept in check by an awkwardly placed hitbox. Basically, take specifically the second hit of Captain Falcon's up smash and make it smaller. But if you want something more imposing, look no further than the down smash, where Cinderace ignites one foot, then stomps the ground with enough force to unleash a wave of flame on all sides. Strong and surprisingly long-lasting, it's great for tech chasing or catching a dodge. However, it's so slow to come out that you basically need a read to ever connect with it. And yes, I realize the Score Bunny line can't actually learn Burning Jealousy, but it fits closely enough thematically that it felt like an acceptable creative liberty. That's the grounded stuff, so how about Cinderace's aerials? Starting with a neutral air where they stick out one foot and hold it there for a while. You've seen similar neutral airs on other characters, and this one plays the same role, with hitboxes that linger an especially long time and help bust out of pressure, cover landings against short-ranged attacks, or even start combos if you land with a late hit. It's a little slower to come out than its counterparts, but also has more range than usual due to Cinderace's longer legs. The move Double Kick fills in as the forward air, a pair of sweeping aerial kicks one after the other that combo into each other. They're good for spacing in midair or sticking a hitbox out to intercept recoveries. Knockback ain't the greatest though, so don't rely on it for netting knockouts at any reasonable percent. What's this, an aerial flare attack? Cinderace ignites one foot, then spins around and kicks outward forcefully with a maneuver designed to redirect a soccer ball mid-flight repurposed for combat. With a strong hit but quite a bit of lag on it, it's basically a mid-air smash attack and probably the most reliable non-special flare attack since it's not as hard to use as the others. Cinderace's up air is a typical flip kick, something we've seen on other fighters, but it fits the footballer motif. With decent frame data and notably good range compared to others like Mario's thanks to the aforementioned long legs, it's a juggling tool that can also lead into a combo or two at lower percents if you use it while landing. And for a down air with flare, Cinderace sets both feet on fire at once and plummets straight down. If you hit a fighter, shield, or container during your descent, you bounce off it with a fiery blast. It's a ground pound type down air with the usual mix-up roll and a little more startup than its counterparts, but since you get damage and meter when it hits, it's actually more worth going for than usual. On to Cinderace's grab game, which is certainly a thing. Their actual grabs are technically pretty normal, but they have awkward animations with mediocre range and frame data. This is not a character accustomed to grappling. If you do get your hands on someone, their pummel simply knees the opponent. Cinderace's throws get more interesting, kicking the opponent away like taking a free kick after a penalty for the forward throw, soft tossing them and performing a bicycle kick for the back throw, an up throw that sends them up and away with a kick originally designed to clear a ball out of pressure and toward the opposite end of the field, and a down throw where Cinderace gets impatient and just tackles them. That's a penalty waiting to happen. While they deal decent damage and give positional advantage, none of Cinderace's throws can combo or kill. It's not a strong point of the moveset. Finally, how about a few taunts? Such as one that imitates Champion Leon's signature pose, can't not reference that, one where Cinderace turns toward the camera and waves to the off-screen audience, and a quick training exercise where they keep a small fireball airborne by repeatedly kicking it with one foot. We're coming down to the wire. Good thing Cinderace's specials tie this whole moveset together. Starting with, what else? The neutral special. And with it, we answer one important question. What's a footballer without a ball to kick? Pyro Ball is one of Cinderace's signature moves, a hard-hitting fire elemental physical attack with more accuracy than usual for its archetype. But our version will have much more going on than just that. On use, Cinderace takes out a small stone and begins juggling it with one foot. After about 3 seconds, a fireball ignites around the stone, creating a tangible projectile. From there, press in any cardinal or diagonal direction to aim and kick the fireball in an arc. Once it touches a fighter or object, or travels far enough, it explodes for moderate damage. Oh, but that's not all. If you shield once the fireball is formed, it drops to Cinderace's feet to save for later, kept along with you as you move using an extra set of animations that showcase expert ball handling skills. You can press B again at any point to kick the fireball then. And if you press it while performing an attack, you cancel out of the attack a few frames early to potentially combo it into the fireball. Not only that, but the more you've built up the cheer meter, the bigger and stronger the explosion gets at the end. At level 3 cheer, it even gains pyrotechnics on the blast for extra visual flair. One other way that helped these attacks stand out from all the other fire users. Pyro Ball is a unique projectile that favors technique over raw power or pressure. Works best when you want to call out a vulnerable opponent, intercept their movement when you have the advantage, or finish a string of attacks. Fair warning though, only a few moves actually true combo into a cancelled Pyro Ball. The others are just strings and 50-50s. You also need to aim it correctly for it to hit, and it requires too much prep to be an actual zoning tool. Whew, that was complicated. How about something nice and simple next? Something like... Okay, that works. A physical fire move that's been around since Gen 5, Flame Charge is a fire-infused tackle that deals minor damage and buffs the user's speed in the process. The Score Bunny line learns it early on. Our Smash rendition has Cinderace set the air around their body ablaze and air dash forward. How far the dash goes and how it interacts with opponents depends on how much cheer you currently have. At level 1, the fire looks pretty typical, the dash goes less than half the length of Final Destination, and it deals a single hit for decent damage. Level 2 cheer gives the dash increased distance, adds an explosion at the end for a second hit, and upgrades the visuals to look like a fiery comet in flight. But with your cheer maxed out, the dash travels 2/3 the length of FD, deals multiple hits to anyone in its way, and finishes with a chain of fireworks. With more depth than your typical burst option, Flame Charge's effectiveness hinges on how well you've been appealing to the crowd. The more they're cheering you on, the better this move gets at covering distance, dealing damage, and netting knockouts. You can even use it off stage as an alternate recovery option, making you more unpredictable. There is a downside to this move though. It has significant end lag no matter how much cheer you've built up. If someone shields this thing, you're probably getting punished. Up next, we have the Up Special. What do we have lined up as this character's main recovery move? Oh, this'll be interesting. Acrobatics is an unconventional flying type move from Gen 5 onward, mostly available to mons that aren't natural flyers. Its normally underwhelming damage gets doubled if the user does not have an item equipped. The Score Bunny line doesn't learn this one naturally, but can get it via TM. On use, Cinderace leaps forward with an acrobatic front flip that leaves a trail of fire in its wake. It goes a moderate distance on its own, deals minor contact damage, and you can adjust its trajectory a little by pressing directions. Sounds simple, right? But if you have a charged Pyro Ball on hand, or foot, you can press B mid-flip to stop in place, kick the fireball, and blow it up on the spot for a second flip that propels you even further. The resulting explosion behaves exactly like Pyro Ball does normally, which means the more cheer you have, the bigger and stronger it is. Acrobatics is a straightforward recovery move normally, but with the right prep, it gains extra distance, more mix-up potential, and even a chance to turn the tables on edgeguard attempts. That said, the hitbox on Cinderace's body isn't very big, so this move is vulnerable to getting intercepted mid-flight by fighters with projectiles or disjointed attacks like sword swings. And a detonated Pyro Ball is a little smaller and weaker when used in this move compared to the neutral special. These all seem nice for finesse and all, but what if you just want something that hits hard? That is where the down special comes in. Overheat is a long-running, non-physical fire move that deals massive damage but weakens the user's non-physical attacks afterward, meaning each use carries inherent risk. It's another thing the Scorbunny line learns through outside means, this one via TR. On use, Cinderace gathers energy for a moment, then drops to their knees, strikes a pose, and unleashes a huge explosion of flame on the spot. Even with an empty meter, it's pretty strong, but higher levels of cheer raise its range, damage, total hits, and duration. At level 3 cheer, it's practically a self-contained fireworks display. Overheat is a powerful area of effect attack best used when you have a read or when your opponent makes a mistake at the ledge. It can net knockouts even at low levels of cheer, and the more meter you have, the scarier it gets. But it also carries several drawbacks, like its knockback being mostly vertical so it doesn't kill any earlier at the ledge compared to on stage, or having significant startup and a ton of end lag that leaves you a sitting duck afterward. Or the fact that it puts you into free fall, so using it off stage just leads to you losing a stock. Oh, and the audience doesn't like it when you go for broke and it doesn't work. If Overheat misses, you immediately lose a slice of your cheer meter. Just like the original version, it has built-in drawbacks you have to keep in mind. One last play to make, Cinderace's Final Smash. And while some characters require a deeper dive to find something to use, this one can fall back on something tailor-made for the role. The Dynamax and Gigantamax mechanic in Sword and Shield lets a Pokemon grow to giant size for 3 turns, raising their HP and giving them access to new attacks. Cinderace picked up an obtainable unique giant form through the Isle of Armor expansion, and with it comes a signature move to match. Empowered by the Smash Ball, Cinderace leaps into the background, grows to Gigantamax size, and forms a colossal fireball to stand on, complete with angry eyes. A targeting reticle appears for a few seconds to aim with. Use the time to corral opponents where you want them. Once you've set your aim, Cinderace rears back, focuses, and kicks the fireball straight at the stage, creating an enormous explosion centered on the spot you aimed at. The blast has a massive radius, but its damage and knockback depend on how close to the center your opponents are when they get hit. At the edge, they only take about 20% damage and minimal knockback. But if they get hit dead on, that's probably game right there. This is what Cinderace could be like in Smash. A fiery athlete in prime form with the skills of a pro and a flair for the dramatics spurred on by the roar of the crowd. It takes a steady hand, foot, and steadier mind to find the right balance of safety and spectacle, but striking it perfectly makes for a fighter far more interesting than the sum of their parts. Cinderace's high points are built around excellent base mobility that gets even better as you build meter, leaving opponents in the dust. Being surprisingly competent in a disadvantaged state is another plus, due to having both mobility and some nice escape/breakthrough options. And the momentum gained from landing flare attacks and reaching high levels of cheer makes for someone who is very capable of both extending leads and making comebacks, as long as you can keep that momentum going. However, most flare attacks are pretty impractical to use, low-level specials included, and building momentum requires finding ways to make them connect. Lackluster grabs and little reward from throws compared to most other fighters means threatening opponents who use their shields a lot can prove difficult. And the fact that the cheer meter slowly empties means the Cinderace player must fight aggressively at all times to maintain the upper hand. Even with a lead, you can't rest easy. Alright then, this one put me in a weird spot. I wanted to defy the narrative calling this character a shoo-in while also defying the other narrative that this character would be a boring pick. Well, my first choice from Sword of Shield would be someone else, as anyone who follows me elsewhere already knows. I'd be okay with Cinderace if the moveset was handled in a way that felt unique and tailored to the character. That was what I aimed for with this concept. Even then, there are a few aspects I'm still not 100% sure on. I might have strayed too far from the Scorbunny line's natural learn set with acrobatics and overheat. I did look into Cinderace's other signature move, Court Change, for the down special, but it just didn't click as well. I considered having flare attacks be variants of the A button moves that you had to do a special input to use, but ultimately that idea felt too complicated and impractical, and I decided to just tie the mechanic to specific attacks instead. And I kinda wonder if I could have used more real-world soccer techniques, since I'm not as familiar with that sport compared to others. Suppose that's for you to decide, huh? As you see, a character that might have seemed bland at first glance can have some really interesting stuff just waiting to be tapped into. I hope I've managed to show that, since it's been increasingly hard to point out lately, with speculation so focused on star power and hype factor. If you've made it this far and heard me out this whole way, then thanks for sticking around. But special thanks to these people who helped make this video happen, and an extra shout out to my patrons for their continued support after all this time and all these hot takes. So, until next time, not long to wait now until our next big batch of news. Anyone else getting nervous?